All right, thanks for tuning in again. This is Pat with Hemp Outlaw, and this recording will be placed on hempoutlaw.io, but also Advocate Hemp. And I had the great opportunity to talk to John and TaliSeed, and they're with Mystic Farms in Arizona. And guys, if you could just do me a favor, and either one of you go first, kind of your background, where you came into hemp, kind of, and mainly background. We'll dig a little bit more into that a little bit. John, you want to jump first?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having us on. Yeah. So I started my career in cannabis in 2008, and I was working in the medical marijuana scene in Southern California. And just, you know, for all you guys out there that are new to CBD, back then, 12 years ago, 1% CBD was considered high. And it gives you a bearing for how long it really took to get where we're at. I know everyone seems like, oh man, 4 years ago we were getting X dollar or this or that, but it's really been a work in progress for 12 years. And so in 2017, I made the switch to full-time hemp and started working on feminized seed production in Colorado. Managed about 350 acres near Rocky Ford, Colorado. Was able to scale up a lot of my indoor practices to more of an agricultural setting, and just been pushing forward new genetics, autoflower. We're doing some fiber varieties this year, and I moved to Arizona in June of 2019, the first day of legalization for hemp here in the state. We were planting about 5 acres south of Tucson, and this year we're doing a couple different test plots in different regions, trying to see early planting, late planting, harvest techniques, all of the above. But yeah, I've been in the industry for about 12 years.
You know what I really like, John, about you, and I've known of you for years with some of the folks that we mutually like and respect, is that not only do you have the longevity of the 12 years, but where you've been, really has given you an opportunity to see a lot of different things in different climate zones with different seeds, different farmers, some farmers that are coming to this from, the Dakotas or Oregon or Kentucky or Tennessee that are looking at it from a traditional, hey, how can we use all our old tobacco stuff, to where now you're down in Arizona with TaliSeed and Mystic Farms. TaliSeed, can you share a little bit about kind of your approach, a little background of what got you to here?
Yeah, well, my background is I've been doing organic farming starting out on a small scale in my early 20s. When I got into it, I've been farming for about 15 years now. The last 5 or 6 years, I've been honored to be the farm manager of a 165-acre operation where we do about 12 acres of row crop vegetables and anywhere from 50 to 100 acres of pasture crops for alfalfa, wheat, Bermuda grass, animal, rotational grazing. We do a full-scale sustainable agriculture farm here. And then I'm a part of a budding university, the University of Ascension Science and the Physics of Rebellion. This is a spiritual university where farming and regenerative agriculture are a huge part of that vision. So I get to actually instruct at that university and do just large-scale education in farming. And I think that's really my passion. Meeting John this last year when we realized that Arizona was going legal with hemp immediately, 6 months or longer prior to the legalization, we did lots and lots of research. We saw hemp for CBD in particular as a very important crop for humanity, for the healing of humanity, for the alternative to opiate painkillers, the alternative to addictive anti-anxiety medication, anti-inflammatory drugs. It has literally been evolving with the human species since day one, the cannabis plant, not to mention the THC side, which obviously has its benefits as well. We decided too, from the fiber perspective and the food perspective, that getting into it for more than just the CBD oil, which really is obvious right now. It's the gold rush. We weren't really interested in the gold rush as much as we were the holistic and regenerative nature of this crop. So we were, it's been a serendipity, one after another in our working relationship with John here, bringing his skills. I mean, we've been farming. He's been in cannabis for as long as I've been in full-scale organic farming, and we were able to come together in a very short amount of time in a synergy that, in my life, I've worked with a lot of people, and I've never been able to hit the ground running faster. We were able to push forward his genetics in the desert climate down here in a really big way, and we established quite the offering of a seed company and a genetics right out the chute from first year of legalization in Arizona. And we were only able to do that with the years of experience that he brought. So I brought to the table a high degree of focus on execution of the vision. And so I'm very interested in project management. I'm a computer programmer and data scientist. I'm very interested in the Internet of Things, making very cheap sensors to make your life easier, to give you more information. If there's anything that we need in this industry, it's better access to better information for cheaper.
And that's the thing. If I can jump in, I mean, and I will warn folks that end up watching this is, if you go to mysticfarms.farm, you may not get out of there for a while. You may want to just move to Arizona, pack up your stuff, and head out. It is just an amazing place with a bunch of amazing people, and it's very, very easy to see that rather quickly. So I could see why John may never leave Arizona. You know, he may be there. But some of the things you were saying is, and we'll jump into it. And what first things I want to try and do is on the farming thing, because when you guys are like a perfect example of where we want things to go. People that have a rich history and experience in the cannabis, maybe the marijuana side, but are really making that bridge to traditional organic and farming operations so that it actually becomes more sustainable for farmers, so that actually farmers can do this stuff, not the gold rush folks that are trying to sell oil for the top price. We don't need another OPEC for CBD or a certain kind of cannabinoid oils. What we need is the full plant to be able to have the things we used to ate hemp all the time. When you eradicate hemp for the things, we're missing that in our own systems. So we used to have a very synergistic relationship with this plant, from a building materials, from a rope, from a fabric, whatever. And then again, we're all outlaws now because we try and get a plant back in there that can sequester more CO2 than almost anything else, can do more soil enhancement than almost anything else, that can be a rotational crop. And then you add in those building materials and some of those other big things. I'm okay that the gold rush is CBD, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But I really hope that we don't let a molecule, THC, decide the fate of a plant that has a whole lot going on below the flower. You know what I mean? It's a molecule, and every legislation and all the politics is around a molecule when there's a lot of other molecules. One of the questions to jump right into the farming part of this is if there's a farmer out there and they're looking at genetics and they're looking at seeds and they're looking at clones and all those, how do I get started? Why should someone plant, let's say, seeds over clones or clones over seeds?
So there's a couple different things going on when you're making that decision. If you're in a brand new environment, just because a clone was chosen as a keeper phenotype is usually what happens when you find something that's in clone form. It was adapted to a certain, usually indoor settings, greenhouse settings, where the plant wasn't put against a lot of stress. And so if you only plant one phenotype in your field, it could make it or it could break it. And so we here at Mystic Farms, we believe that seeds is a better option. You have a tap root that's going to drive deeper. The clones could be a clone of a clone of a clone over. I mean, I had some genetics for 8-10 years where it was a clone of a clone for that long. So with seeds, you have a brand new plant. It's more vigorous. It's easier to store and populate large volumes. Obviously, this is industrial scale. Now, if you are going to look for smokable flower where you want something very, very uniform in an oil perspective, or if you're searching for certain type of different terpenes, or you just need the profile to be exact, cloning works. But for large scale farming, we definitely recommend seeds.
And when we're talking large scale farming, we're not talking large in hemp. We're not talking large scale like Nebraska corn or whatever like that. What would one consider a small operation? I mean, you're outside of the greenhouse kind of operation. You're in the soil. What is a typical or a good size farm? Where can a farmer actually take this and actually monetize it, get into this industry? How much land do they need?
I would say that something inside of 5 acres is probably where you is observed as something smaller, where I could maybe justify planting some clones on something like that.
Okay.
To get your feet wet, I would keep it 10 acres or less, just so you can get a good idea for how this plant likes your environment, your soil type. You don't want to overwater it. And then also, depending on where you're at, your harvesting techniques are going to change. Do you have the labor force to handle all of that? Is it dry where you're at in October? I mean, down here in Arizona, October, November is some of the best time of the year. So laying it on the ground and running a combine is no problem. But if you're on the coast of Oregon, October is not nice. And you see a lot of the hops dryers and forced air heating facilities that are going up, and that's their solution, but that's very costly. It takes a lot of time to build those things out. If you have one near you, everyone is harvesting at the same exact time. So, but yeah, I would say to a new farmer, 1 to 10 acres I would keep it within that range and just give it a shot.
Because there is a lot of labor. I remember I saw a video that TaliSeed and an associate of his were doing where they were just in the field getting rid of males, I think is what you guys were doing and looking for that. Mm-hmm. And so this ends up being a not farm from the combine in air conditioner thing. You got to get down there and walk around and get to know your plants, a bit more. And so is a soil, and again, TaliSeed, you've been doing a lot of organic things. So you make great soil, but did you find that you have to do some amendments to soil when you were in Portland, you've been in greenhouses, now you're in Colorado, and there's things. What are some things that farmers need to know about the soil, if you can?
Yeah, I would say that like any large-scale crop or anything above an acre, you're going to want to do a soil test and have a good agronomist that you work with. Keeping in mind that if you want to do it organically, that most agronomists don't offer all that much support in finding the exact products to achieve fertilization both in the ground and throughout the life of the crop organically. To be OMRI certified is a job. I believe that it is the healthiest way to go. I also believe that the OMRI certification should be open to some interpretation. I think there's some things on those lists that shouldn't be, and I think there's some things not on those lists that should be. We do consultation for that very thing to help you navigate that. If you really want to, the way I put it is you really want to protect your customers. You want to protect your family. There's certain chemicals that I know about that have known deleterious health effects that I would never put in my fields. There's other things that aren't on the OMRI list that I feel like are less harmful and more applicable. But I would say that it is a heavy feeder if you're growing it for CBD, if you're growing it for oil, for full expression, it is a heavy feeder. If you're growing it for fiber, I guarantee you it'll be less of a heavy feeder. But it's like anything, you get out of it what you put in. But there is such thing as overfeeding. And so taking leaf analysis, getting with a good soil testing company and a nutrient company that can test leaf analysis throughout the season is really helpful to know if your application is working. And the other thing that I would recommend is foliar feeding. Foliar feeding, especially with organic nutrients, has accelerated in the past 5 years to the point where you can do things for 1/10 of the cost foliarly. And we've seen the uptake. It's real. I mean, you can take nitrogen that you'd be spending $5,000 on to put in your soil, and you spend 500 and you can do your 5 acres over the course of, the next 2-3 weeks. So,
Wow.
but there's techniques with all that. But yeah, I would say that the hemp plant in general likes well-drained, loamy, acidic soil. So what John was saying is true, that the southern latitudes are going to have the benefit of the dry down in the field. We don't have to do forced air drying in Arizona. I guarantee you that. People are going to be growing 300-acre plots, and they're going to be cutting it in the field for 3 days or 5 days, and they're going to be picking it up with a combine, and they're going to be saving hundreds of thousands of dollars of forced air drying, which the Midwest and the Northwest and the Northeast are going to have to use.
Wow.
So, but what we battle here in turn is alkaline soil and high temperature, high wind, high heat, high light. We push forward varieties this year to account for that. So we actually did field trials where we saw certain seeds from Colorado and Oregon. We saw up to 10 to 20% failure in some of those crops because they couldn't take the heat, so to speak. So we did selections with phenotypes, push forward accelerated genetic, development and trials to come to the table with some alkaline proven seed. And that means high pH. That means the water can be 7.5 to 8 pH and the soil can be 7.5 to 8. When every book you read out there says never do it, they say don't plant hemp in 7.8 pH. And that's true. But the point is that this crop has been illegal for 75 years. And we are 75 years behind the lettuce industry, the radish industry, the carrot industry, the wheat industry. So it's about time that we catch up and we make regional specific varieties that serve a purpose and solve a problem. So that's what we tried to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of the things that, this has been growing this and knowing this plant has been kind of an underground, backwood, you wait, hide it kind of thing. It's mainly been in greenhouses. So when you have greenhouses, it's a pretty, I would just think, a fragile kind of plant. You know what I mean? It's not
Totally.
robust. It can't defend itself. It doesn't. So there's a lot of things you do. One thing I'd be remiss if I didn't say is not only talking to you guys but you're not only growing, you're not only experiencing, but you actually consult with folks too. I mean,
Correct.
part of what you do, which I love about what you guys are doing, is you're taking the knowledge that you've had over this collective 25 years or so, 28 years, and you make that available to other folks. And so the neat thing about, again, anybody watching this, is reach out to the folks at it's mysticfarms.farm, because I think you're going to find they're great guys anyway, as you should already be able to tell. But also young guys that have a lot of experience, but they have experience in when it was in greenhouses, and then when they had to take it outside and try and say, that dog won't hunt, that plant's not going to do well out here in this area. And so I really think that's good. So start a little smaller, bring experts in. If you don't know kind of what you're doing right now, there are experts out there. One of the things I also kind of like about this is the business part of this. When you meet folks, it's almost closer to all the other craft industries. So craft brewery, craft spirits, where folks that have gone before you are an open book and they'll help you. You know what I mean? It isn't so corporate. There is like this brotherhood and sisterhood of people that are trying to bring this plant outdoors and trying to make it sustainable and the right genetics in the right places. And so I think knowing the varieties, knowing the soil that you have to deal with, knowing what your area of the hemisphere does, that's really important. And I just would say people have already done that, so lock into that. So we have, let's say, 5 acres. You start small, you get to know your plant. How many plants per acre would somebody grow? Is there a number for that?
So it usually depends on when you're going to plant.
Okay.
I have a couple different strategies. I've seen as low as 1,200, and I've seen as high as about 5,000.
Oh, wow.
So the closer you plant, the sooner you'll be able to have a canopy that is shading out any of your weed suppression.
Okay.
Also, if you plant late, in 2018, I planted in Rocky Ford at the end of July, like July 25th. I think we put like 4,000 plants an acre on there, and we got up to about 3 or 4 feet, pretty solid canopy. So I don't know, it's everyone's preference. If seed cost is seems high to you and you're going to plant early, you can stretch your seed count on more acres, go and do like 1,200 or something around there. But take in mind that you're going to need the labor to get rid of the weeds in the first 2 months of that grow. But the different patterns, if it's going to be autoflower or fiber, you see a lot of times fiber, the seed cost is like $50 a pound. So you're drilling a pound or two an acre and maybe seeing 60% germ, and you're ending up with 25,000 plants an acre, and they're growing 12 feet tall. That's a whole different ball game. But for CBD production, I like to see between 1,800 and 2,500 is my sweet spot.
And you're not seeing a lot of folks. I mean, it's interesting. All industries are similar to this, but it's kind of follow the money, right? And so wherever the money seems to be, where the market is, and so that's where we're seeing that gold rush of CBD, and it's the oil. And now and folks will actually start picking those molecules apart and putting them in different formations. But you're not seeing a lot of folks right now planting the more industrial hemp, tall plant, fiber kind of plant, less flower, or are you?
No, I've only seen 2 different farms try like 5 acres of it. In 2018, I was able to see farms across like 6 or 7 states. I saw probably 25, 30 different varieties grow inside fields, and that's how I was able to understand the selections that I have made are vigorous, are dominant, are high yielding biomass production varieties. This was my focus because that's what seemed to be what the market was asking for.
Right.
The height in the fiber varieties seems to be an issue because we don't have all of the equipment like the Canadians have. They're just like readily available for that. People are used to working with it or whatever. So they see this thing that's like bamboo jungle, and they're like, how do I even get this down? And then what do I do with it? And so there's really a confusion there on that. And yeah. I think that the CBD gold rush thing is what drove a lot of this early production. So we'll be playing with all kinds of different things this year and trying to, some of the fiber varieties only have, 2 to 4% CBD, where we would like to see something that is maybe 8% CBD with good big seed on it and fiber. So we could call it a tri-crop, be able to make hemp seed oil or hemp seed for food, have fiber, and then the flower that comes off the top of that would provide us some good CBD material and get into direct seed planting and really drive the cost per acre down.
And do something that farmers are used to. They're used to growing corn, and you can have ethanol, you can have corn, you can have corn oil, you can have corn, and doing the same thing with soy. Making this to where it's sad. I went to a hemp fest here about a year ago, and the number of folks that if they didn't hit that 3%, it's like burn the crop.
Yeah,
right. You've got to destroy it, and it's ridiculous that this crop that quite frankly can be used for other things. And I guess my enthusiasm with this ends up being a lot of economic development. I'm not talking about for individual industries or whatever. I'm talking about just the number of jobs, the number of new technologies that'll come from this, the amount of new equipment that'll be created, and the jobs that go with that kind of equipment. How this can replace plastics. I'm big into local energy too. I'm a localist, so I like local energy.
Same here, yeah.
And it was sad to hear. I read here recently that the windmills that are out there creating all this wind energy, the blades for that are all fiberglass. And after their end of life, they take those, they chop them up, they send them to a place up in Wyoming that say they'll take them, and they bury them up there. And you look at that and say, we could be making hemp propellers for blades for those things, and while it's growing, it's doing good for the soil and the air. And while it's growing, portions of it are being multiple crops, multiple economic revenue places for the farmer, and then also looking at paper and plastic and building materials or whatever. And so I just get a little frustrated, in all frankness, that again, I look forward to the gold rush. If anybody's in CBD, I was in it too. I think it's an incredible product, and I think as TaliSeed was saying, it should be a choice and an option versus to take this medicine, go home, And if you have problems, call me. This is something that people can benefit from. And so, and sorry for that little rant, but it just kind of upsets me that this plant that has been around for a long period of time, that stuff we ate it. And we as a country at one time encouraged everybody, you got to plant this.
Yeah.
And politically, it's decided to be, again, because one molecule, and I don't care if you smoke pot or not, it doesn't make any difference to me. Yeah. But I don't think you should actually say, I can't grow rye or certain kinds of grain because somebody's going to make alcohol from it. You know what I mean? And I see it somewhat similar to there. So getting back to harvesting, and we know what they're doing in California, China, India, where this crop has been there for a while. What are some of the best harvesting techniques that you're seeing people use right now with maybe the current equipment we have and the current knowledge we have?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot out there. I think that moving forward into these kind of tri-crop situations where you can get fiber, seed, and biomass for CBD, there'll be very innovative things happening. I do know that there is some processing companies. I think what we're seeing is just a delay in the investment into the supply chain and infrastructure for these other verticals in hemp, rather than just the CBD, which sort of cropped up overnight because a lot of people in the THC industry were able to just retool their equipment for CBD. But when you talk about large-scale agriculture, it's going to take a couple of years. But there are people out there that are putting their money where their mouth is and making processing companies, especially in the Southeast. I think in Tennessee, there's a company, and it seems to be down there near Kentucky and Tennessee where they're actually starting to do that. But in terms of harvesting for CBD, I mean, John's had the experience of pulling down 360 acres, which was wild, and there was a lot of different things that they had to go through there. It all depends on your climate, like we were saying earlier. It's very popular. You hear a lot about this wet harvest and compressed bale technique, where people will come in and dry it to a certain level, but it doesn't have to be fully dry, and then they can compress and make these bales airtight. And then, so we've seen farmers succeed at that if it is the right pressure and is done right. I've also heard of farmers who took down 500,000 pounds in wet bales, and they opened them up when they were trying to sell it, and it was all black and it was all mold. So that's sad. I think we all read the article about the suicides of hemp farmers this year, and that's a tragedy, and it happens in farming. I mean, India has one of the highest suicide rates among farmers in the world. So we have to think about this from a holistic perspective. That not only does this crop have the ability to heal people, ailments, to heal economies, to provide sustainable alternatives to non-renewable resources, but also the farmer who's been busting his butt for so long, only for the top, 1% of farms to actually be very profitable in this country. And see, what keeps happening is small farms keep getting driven out by higher and higher and higher equipment costs and standards that are virtually impossible to meet unless you're the biggest of the big. And then what ends up happening is these small farms end up getting bought out by the next big guy, and then they have their 20,000, 50,000 acre farms, and they're being run by a guy in an office in a hedge fund somewhere. So I think that, like John was saying, if you're going to start this, start small. If you've done it for a year and you feel like you cut your teeth and you want to do 50 or 100 acres, just be prepared to meet the harvest with the wisdom of your climate, and get someone on your team who's done it. That's what I would say. Get someone on your team who knows what right and wrong is with this crop, because there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions out there. But I would say harvest technique is very much specific to locale. I don't know if you want to comment.
Yeah, one thing that you kind of mentioned earlier was you're talking about the craft industry, kind of like craft beer type of specialty products like that. So one thing you need to realize is if you are growing for smokable flower, or you intend on having this really high CBD biomass, and your processor is going to require some sort of standard, you need to build the harvest technique backwards from that. You need to understand that terpenes are going to start to get lost at 95 degrees, and you won't lose too much, but around 110, most terpenes are starting to evaporate. If the extractor wants those, and your forced air heater can't be hitting 200 degrees Fahrenheit. just not responsible. If you are intending to grow for seed and you want to use the seed, you need to be able to do a slower, dry, and a controlled environment. So it all depends on which type of hemp product you're really chasing. And as far as the smokable flower goes, there's this big controversy with the 0.3 laws. There's like almost no varieties that in the actual smokable flower form are going to hit 0.30 THC.
Total
So
THC.
you need to understand that if you're playing that gray area where you're going to say, oh, I only count Delta 9, I don't count THCA, know that the USDA is tightening all that up, and that's not a sustainable business plan. But right now, that market is working. That material does need to be dried slower and more of a marijuana type of a facility. But don't think you're going to do 100 acres of smokable flower. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So, John, you just mentioned something. So, what does total THC mean, and how does it affect how plants are tested in the field?
So total THC means that the USDA is working to tighten up the language in the law, and the decarboxylation of THCA is 0.877% of THCA. So they're just assuming that this material, if heated to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, will convert from THCA into Delta 9 THC. So the plant in its raw form is like 99% THCA, and then the rest of it might be Delta 9. So right now we're seeing maybe 0.1 Delta 9. And so what you need to understand is that you need to take what the decarboxylated value of that THC would be. And I've seen the testing in Oregon, Colorado, and Arizona. I've walked the field with the Department of Agriculture, and all three states, they're chopping the top 2-3 inches, walking in a star pattern at random. Here in Arizona last year, we did feel like, there were some plants that were really struggling, and then there was plants that were really doing good, and they weren't really taking much of the struggling plants. So we felt like, oh no,
It was skewed.
are we going to maybe not pass this test because it's not a representative sample in our opinion? We did pass 8 varieties in the heat with the stress, with everything that was going on, new varieties for this climate. And so we're proud of that. We're fortunate to, I had a couple years of experience under my belt, so I knew what was coming. I knew what their protocol probably would be. But yeah, total THC is just your THCA times 0.877 plus your Delta 9 equals total potential THC.
So Delta 9 is the psychoactive component. Delta 9 is what gets you high. THCA does not. It needs to be cooked. And he said decarboxylated. It's a fancy way to say it needs to be cooked, or brought to temperature. Smoked is one way. Heating it up in oil is another way. And then, of course, extraction is another way. But as you were saying, it's a shame that this one molecule is preventing so much R&D from happening. And what I would say is it's kind of inevitable in this country that THC will be legalized at some point, even recreationally, if not decriminalized before then. And at that point, all of this is going to be a moot point. So we're spending a lot of, there's a lot of money, time, legislation, effort going into this 0.3 when there's countries, nation states around the world who are 1%. And 1% is a much more achievable place to be when you're doing high CBD development and you want to also mix it with other uses of the plant. And I would lobby for 1%. I would say if there's anything that we need to be telling the USDA on mass, it's raise the limit. Because right now the rules are interim. We're still functioning on the 2016 Farm Bill, or what?
Yeah. It started in 2014. Then the 2018 came out. We're still operating on that.
So
they gave kind of like some of the general rules that they wanted to switch the testing to only DEA approved testing,
and then they
which
backpedaled.
Those don't even exist to the volume of what this would be. We're pushing research and development all year round, so we're looking to get 10, 20, 50, 100 tests at a time. So, if they come out to one of our test plots and we're like, oh yeah, test every variety.
They'll be there for 3
Yeah,
days.
we'd be eating up that lab for 2 weeks. So
it was hard enough to get 8 tests on 5 acres. I mean, normally they come out and do 1 test on 50 acres. So
that's the thing. And anybody watching this, I want to just make a not a side comment, a direct in your face comment. Farmers are very intelligent. They usually use technology and equipment and science more so. I would place most farmers that I've known and met, and you guys are incredible examples of just the intelligence and the depth in which people go, than that hedge fund guy.
right.
The hedge fund guy and the politician, they're really not that smart. But if you get most farmers, they know more about weather, satellites, sensor devices, soil.
Yeah.
So I think the industry's in really good hands with guys like you. And I just would say personally, I'm just so impressed of where things are going, because I've met a lot of people in this industry. And most people that I have in this industry aren't pushing for the gold rush. They're not pushing for bigger mine claims. They're just pushing for more diversity in the use of this product. And most of them are pushing for the stuff that isn't being pushed against. It's like we're pushing for the things to open up that no one should be against. So
Right.
be against what you want to be against, and legislate that, regulate that, do whatever you want to do with that. But these other things, so you can have different varieties, there has to be, as you say, 2014 Farm Bill. I tell you what, it's never been hard to get pot and marijuana in the U.S. It's really never been hard. So getting these things has never been hard. You know what I mean? You can legislate all you want, but if somebody, and you can have a state that doesn't have recreational and doesn't have marijuana, and I would probably say with a good degree of confidence that there's still marijuana in that state. It's still being smoked by lots of people, and it's still having an effect on things. So what I like is getting to reasonableness. And I think one of the problems has been in this industry is misinformation and lack of good information from which to go on. And a lot of it was done by the gold rush folks, the folks that wanted to hype things up, that this plant that actually can do amazing synergistic great things for people was pushed almost like it'll help your hair grow, you'll have better sex, and you'll be liked by more people, And you say, no, that's not what it does. Why can't you just like what it does and celebrate it, and then all the other kinds of things? So I that was a little bit of a rant to say, I'm really impressed with what you guys are doing and the intelligence in which you're doing it and the science basis that you're doing. I hope the other side that wants to constrict this actually brings similar folks to the table, because if they do, reasonableness will win out. The science.
Yeah, well, and I think, everyone says, oh, I wish we had 1%, because we know there are countries that do, and that all the genetics that are going around can hit 20% CBD, but it'll be 0.8 THC. And I'm like, okay, well, they're probably not going to budge on that. But if they would just change the testing protocol, we're talking about a plant where the whole plant is of use. So why are you coming in chopping the top 2 inches of the flower when I'm going to use the whole plant?
And you're going to kill my whole crop.
If you took the whole plant and ground it up, everything's going to be 0.3, and it makes a better representation. There has been conversation about remediation, where they're making some kind of like second option for the farmer if they can prove that before the material leaves their field that they did something to bring the material to 0.3, or it was extracted and removed or something like that. It leaves a lot of room for some weird stuff to go on. I'm kind of confused on how they would actually monitor that, but I am in favor for anything that prevents disking under a farmer's whole entire crop.
Well, to Arizona's benefit, they actually actively did remediation on certain farmers that were hot by incorporation of non-floral biomass material into the harvested crop. So that is one of and I think Arizona's ahead of the curve in that, and people should look into that, because there was farmers that tested hot, they appealed to the state, and the state came with a solution. They didn't come with a torch and a disc. They came with reasonableness. And so Brian McGrew at the state of Arizona, I know him. He's a good dude, and he's worked really hard to get this to be a real reasonable crop and not just something where they're going to come in and disc you under. So there is ways to get around it, but like John's saying, we need this legislation to be very well defined and in favor of the farmer. You know what I mean?
Well, no, I know exactly what you mean. It's almost like we're taking the Cheech and Chong movies, or the folks that are way out in the boonies of California growing marijuana. We're actually overlaying that stereotype on farmers.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of farmers, when they put 50 acres or 5 acres or 5,000 acres in the ground, I don't think they should have some expectation that there's a really good likelihood that that was a complete waste of time. All they're looking for is new markets. So if the market for, if I can't sell it in a legal, recreational, or medicinal state for the flower, for THC, and I can't really sell it to CBD, then give me another market.
Right.
Just give me another market, because that seems to be the case for almost all other crops, right? So instead, we have these farmers that if I were farming this, I don't care what it ends up being. I just know I don't want right now what's happening with this pandemic of farmers having to till in radishes and corn and all these things because there's no market, because the supply chain, or they're having to do other kinds of things. It just seems to me that just make it easy so a farmer can raise it and have whatever testing you want to do, whether it's Colorado, Arizona, wherever, whatever it comes out, it should have a market where it goes to. So, okay, you've got a hot crop. That needs to go to plastics, paper, or whatever,
Amen, yeah.
But it doesn't have to be burned or tilled into the soil. I mean, it's almost like, why are you punishing the farmer for that one molecule?
Yeah.
It just seems to me so unreasonably and so illogical where this is. And most of it done by people that actually, by such a small percentage of where this plant will be. The tail is definitely wagging the dog here. And again, I think a lot of this thing has to do with getting real solid, truthful information out there of what this is. Not everybody in this space wants to own a marijuana dispensary. Not everybody. Those are hard businesses, and quite frankly, everybody I know in those businesses are phenomenal businessmen and women. They've had to do so many things that a normal business would not have to do. Run cash, not big deposits, not credit card processing, all the knots in that business. And now to do that for businessmen and the farmers, I just want to say it is so wrong on almost every other level, and we need to have some things. So you see Colorado, Oregon, and Arizona, to your point, TaliSeed, you see them starting to do some things. Well, there are going to be success models now that other people can follow and still so a farmer, when they plant this, because farmers they're the best localists we have.
Mm-hmm.
Farmers that you have an Ace Hardware store, you have a Walmart way out in Kansas, who's probably doing the most of the economics to support those things are farmers and the folks that actually do things with them. So I think most of these laws have to be put into place of not the end product, but the farm side of it. Almost like you guys were saying, you start with the end in mind and where do you want to go? How do you want to harvest? Well, what do you want from that? And work backwards. So pest issues. And you guys have any comments with regards to just the things that are attacking the fields?
Yeah. So if you're going to work in a propagation house where you're going to germinate your seeds and bring up a 3 to 6 inch plant into the field, at that stage, mice and grasshoppers are what we see as two of the biggest threats in those spaces. Your typical aphids and spider mites and cannabis related pests, root, fungus gnats, stuff like that, we haven't seen a lot of that. And then when you get into the field, you have grasshoppers and locusts again until they're about 8 to 10 inches tall. They can probably take on some. I don't know if they can take on a heavy infestation, but if they're around, it's not the end of the world. You do see a lot of ladybugs and predators that come in and help clean up the plant. But the biggest, the corn earworm and the caterpillars in flowering period will completely wipe out a crop. I've seen 150 acres turn brown in a matter of 7 to 10 days. The crop wasn't completely lost, but there was, I don't know, 20% damage, maybe a little more. They break the cell wall of the stem, the flower dies in that section, they move on, go to the next spot, and you'll see like a dead tip of a big flower, and you'll get to it, and usually if you break that piece off, you'll see they'll still be right there eating, or you'll see, you know, the signs of them, and if you look close by, you can usually find it. There are organic ways to foliar, put down, we use the dipel DFBT.
Bacillus thuringiensis.
Yeah, I would get on that early. Spray before you see the caterpillars. They are going to come during the flowering period. Some people do set out traps for the males, for the corn earworm, to see if they're coming, and it'll kind of give you an idea ahead of time that like an infestation is on its way, or they're in the surrounding area, but they do not attack the plant in a vegetative state. So if you can spray, start like 2 weeks before flowering starts, so you kind of already have like a built up coat on there, and it is organic. They eat it, and I think they like die from the inside out or something like that. But yeah, those are the most of the pests that I've seen.
You know, so and again, is that specific to people that are growing for flower? So if I were growing just in for fiber, are the same? Do I have the same pet issues for fiber or just the flower?
So the corn earworm, I've seen burrow into the middle of the fiber, and I don't have a good enough understanding of how you can judge if the fiber did well or not. Like obviously you have your height, and the straight pieces are what they're looking for, but when they're decorticating, I can assume that damage is not going to be good. But if you were growing for seed, for hemp seed oil or food use for the hemp seed, those pests are going to affect the yield and maturity of that seed. You'll see a lot of the seed come out immature, and if there's not the hemp heart, it needs to be full maturity, and the center is going to need to be there. So those pests will ruin the crop or lower your yield at least.
Yeah, birds are another issue, and deer. I would say that, if you are in an area with deer, you need to be good about your fencing, and if you're growing it for seed, outdoors, birds are going to be a serious issue. So there's bird cannons you can get that light off a big loud sound every half hour if you're into that. And then, the higher the deer fence, the better. Double fencing, 2 fences, it really helps. So there's ways around this. And in terms of like specifics, it's a per farm, per climate thing again. And we would love to be able to help people out with specific consultation, because a lot of these broad strokes might not apply to your climate, might not apply to your area, or they might apply double fold. So, but it'd be great to really, I'm interested in networks of farmers creating community together around this crop, and not, like you said, may it be a culture of kind of sharing and not competition, because where I'm going, there's room for all of us. I don't think it's like, oh, I need to dominate this industry and not share anything with you, because I don't want to dominate it. I don't want my company to be the only one that succeeds. I want it to be local. I want it to be boutique. I want it to be craft, and I want everyone to create these supply chains with people they know and trust, because that's how we're going to succeed. Because there is money to be made. The industry is not dead. People are wondering about it because there's so much biomass on the market, blah, blah, blah. My opinion is that there's that 90% of the biomass that was grown last year is probably stored, harvested, and grown in such a way that I wouldn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Yep.
So 10% of it probably is pretty good quality. And of all of it that got sold, how much of that is going to go into CVS shelf goods where you don't even know who processed it? And I wouldn't touch that stuff in the gas station. Gas station CBD is not for me. I want to know my supply chain.
About as good as gas station burritos, I would think.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, I want to touch on 2 other things. So when I was talking about spider mites, there are russet and broad mites that you cannot see with the naked eye. You won't know you have those until flowering period. So if you can get out into your field and look with the basic little scope, microscope, you can Google those things to see what they look like. And then there are the hop latent viroid, different types of viruses that can get into the seed coat, can get into the cloning. You'll see a lot of that more common in cloning.
Greenhouse
different diseases. And then you have your bud rot. While we're on this discussion, you have bud rot to worry about if you're in one of those more humid climates, or you've got a hurricane on the way and you're thinking, should I cut it down early and lose my yield, or should I risk getting wet for 3 days? It is a tricky subject. I hate to promote it, but there are a lot of extractors out there that search for that bottom tier material and will take anything above 3%. They don't care how it looks.
Yeah.
So it's
how much
not
caterpillar poops in it.
Yeah. So it's not that you're completely out, but like TaliSeed was saying, we want to consume the best food, the best products in our lives. And so if you're trying to hit that top tier, you definitely don't want to be dealing with mold or fungus or any of those types of things.
Well, I think as this plant matures again, gets another chance to mature and become a market, the market's infinite. It's not finite. There are major opportunities for everybody. You can buy a very good whiskey, or you can buy bar stuff from Ernie's Bar. You know what I mean? Right. So the consumer should have choices in all these things, and there should be slotted things. Everything you're saying right now just speaks again to the challenges a farmer has. So not only is there bureaucratic and policy challenges and laws and those kind of things you have to jump through, and there's just the things of having stuff in there, but there's all these predators and pests and those things that go there. It just speaks to a need to have more channels from which a farmer can actually take their product out into. If you guys, we're going to round this up, but if you guys could have one thing that you would like to see, and I'll let you each do this, one thing you'd like to see that could happen for farmers, something you could actually see that if it happened for folks in the business, it would be good, and then something for the consumer. So to all through this line, what do you guys see that if this happened for farmers, it would be a better thing for them? If this happened for businesses that are trying to actually take those finished goods, that could be better for them. And then the consumer, where would you like to see some, if you were king for the day, what might you do?
Right. All right. So I'll start with for the farmer. I think I would lean on that 1%, the 1% law. Get the THC content up to 1%, or at least change the testing protocol to whole plant. There's no reason why a farmer who usually grows corn or soy or whatever he's doing needs to have a fear that it's hard enough to battle the weather and the pest and the this and the that, to think that there's some crazy law that's going to take away your crop and tell you to disc it under, and all that work and input was for nothing. So that would be my pick. For business, I would say you know a lot about this. The merchant processing is a nightmare. People can't use the credit cards, and even some of these hemp companies can't access a bank to use. And I am from the marijuana space. I have seen a lot of cash get moved around the states, and it's definitely an uncomfortable feeling. You're vulnerable at a lot of the time. It's not a good place for business development and just confidence in your employees and your overall culture. It's just a bad thing to be dealing with. And then for the consumer, I'd like to see higher minimum dose.
There you go.
I know there is a lot of controversy on if the CBD is getting wasted or not, and they seem to have the dosing down for pets. They're saying 2 milligrams for every 10 pounds. They kind of have it dialed in. For people, every single person's different. Even some very small amounts of minor cannabinoids are giving you a better synergistic effect. But where this thing is going with the industrialization of the market, I'd like to see a 100 milligram gel cap minimum, or something along those lines, where you can afford to take 50 to 200 milligrams a day and not break the bank. It's not right that the people that do really need this can't afford it. And so I'd like to just see the price go down, or even if you're wanting to stay at a $40 to $60 retail bottle, just 3 to 5x the milligrams in the unit.
Well, I'm going to jump in there and tell us, and just hang one second, because I was in the CBD business, had a CBD company, exited it a bit ago, and one of the things that I felt as the business person there to the consumer is, I really felt I was not selling a good product, even though it was premier oil, and it was all those things you wanted to be. But when you're selling somebody a 10 milligram gel, soft gel, or you say boost this up and it's a 25 milligram thing, most of that never gets to your system. You know what I mean? It never gets bioavailable to things. So I always thought that we weren't selling a placebo, but it was, you know what I mean? Because and so I'm able to take 500 milligrams of vitamin C, I'm able to take 200 milligrams of an ibuprofen, right? And somebody says, and it's all the economics of it. If you're spending $20,000 for oil, I can only give you 10 milligrams. I don't, whether it works for you or not. I see, and again, so it ends up being the economics of it are ruling things rather than the science determining most of these things, because most of the products out there, and ours at the time included, in all frankness, yes, could it have some positive effect on you? Yes, I believe that. But boy, if it were 100 milligrams or if it were 200 milligrams and it was in some delivery system that you knew would get and make it available to your system and get into that endocannabinoid system that would benefit you, I would love to see that. It's one of the reasons I got out, because I really did not have confidence that we were selling a product that long term you could stand behind, and that was all dollar economic, no science. Tell us, what are the three things, if you were king for the day, what you would do for those areas?
Yeah, I would say for the farmer, access to the same subsidies that a lot of other crops enjoy, and also incentives for the organic farmer in terms of environmental impact. So lessening environmental impact equals more money to do it, because it costs more money. So I would like to see a lot of that across the board in farming. Is it more reward for protecting the environment and help to do it? The NRCS has some really good programs to help farmers to transition from flood irrigation to drip irrigation, or heavy emitting tractors to lower emitting tractors. So I'd like to see that really take a bigger center stage in terms of legislation. For business, I think to clear up the regulatory confusion and bureaucratic red tape involved in hemp across the states. As a seed company, we have to go through 10 different steps in every state we sell in, and it's like entering a new nation. I mean, it really is. I think that the federal government has been very lax in their oversight in a way, and I think the states have lacked the knowledgeable staff on the people who are writing these laws need to be consulting experts way more. I've seen laws that are written by people who don't know more than the guy down the street who's farming it. So, and that's just because they're underfunded themselves. So we need more education within the legislature at the state level too, to make it more cohesive with the national level. So the business person, like you said, we don't have access to banks half the time. It's that all needs to be fixed if this supply chain is to be smooth running. For the consumer, I think it all comes down to education, and I don't know how we're going to do it, but we have to demystify this product, all the different products that hemp can create, and we need to start to create demand for fiber and food seed. All the hemp seed in the world can't come from Canada. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And all the fiber can't be shipped to China to be processed. It doesn't make any sense. It needs to be thought of as a potential multi-billion-dollar business, which it is, and it needs to be funded as such. So I would like to see, but more education to the consumer on the pitfalls of ingesting or putting on your body topically things that may have chemical residues that are going to hurt you. So in Europe, they label GMO crops. It's a law. Here, we have to label organic crops. It's a little bit different. So to me, there's some political things there that I'd like to see a little bit more cooperation across the aisle, so to speak. I definitely am, Sonny Perdue and Mitch McConnell and these Republican leaders are the people who championed the hemp to be legal in the first place. So I don't think it's a Democrat-Republican thing at all. I think that this plant has the ability to kind of even maybe heal some of those very intense rifts right now that we see in our country politically. So it came at the right time, hemp did. And I think the other thing is to really inform people as to what the real uses are of CBD during the COVID-19 pandemic is important. We have to talk about it. We can't just demonize all the people who are making false claims. That's true. They should stop. But we also have to vet this and realize that cannabinoids do have a role in providing comfort to people if it's just that. If we start with comfort, if there's a systemic way that CBD can affect positive change to COVID-19 patients, then we need clinical trials. We need the government to take it seriously. We need $1 billion to be put towards a plant that might save someone or a derivative thereof. So it's just not being taken seriously because thank God for all the people in Humboldt who did it for 30 years, 50 years, keeping this plant alive and getting shot at and whatever to do it. But it's time that it comes into the mainstream. We're here. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. And one of the things that sometimes gets me, and I use the word too, and we've used it right here, is consumer. I just always want folks to know that I'm more a citizen and a voter than a consumer. And most of the time people just look at us all as consumers. But if we get voters more educated, give them more information, then the next wave of folks that we send to these state houses, federal houses, will actually be a little more knowledgeable themselves. And we'll open this up because I see great economic benefit to this. Again, after we get out of this current crisis and moving forward in a cleaner, more sustainable, more fair ecosystem. And again, in energy, I see that in energy because I believe there's a lot of things we can do there. But I also see this as one of those plants that if you just take a molecule, you make your mind up. But if you take the whole plant, your mind will be made up. And your mind will be made up that it actually makes a lot of sense in some of these different areas. Guys, what's a way? So I've already said mysticfarms.farm. Is there another way that's a good way for somebody to get a hold of you? Because quite frankly, I think if somebody's looking at this product to bring onto their farm, they should at least give you guys a call, shoot you an email, and get some kind of conversation going and see where you can go. How does somebody contact you guys?
It's info@mysticfarms.farm. You can email us, and our phone number, I don't know it by heart, but we have the 800 number that we can throw up on the screen.
I will throw that stuff. That's what I'm going. That's what I will do.
So we do have an 800 number. You can call us anytime, and like I said, we do. We'll talk on the phone with you anytime. If you want to go more in depth, you want to send us your soil test, you want to tell us what you plan and how to do it, we do video conferencing consultation anytime. So
and we're on Instagram and YouTube, and so we'll be pushing out some more of these short videos of educational stuff, or some of our R&D plots are already out there. So if you want to see some live footage of what we got going on today, there's footage out there.
And I will certainly be adding things, notes to this as well, and also maybe some overlays with regards to some of that stuff to do my part to at least try and get this out there. Guys,
awesome.
I know you guys are really busy, and so your time is really valuable. I valued it a lot, and I really appreciate the both of you. And again, all the stuff that Mystics Farm is doing and all the people you work with. I really thank you. I'm grateful.
You too, Pat. Yeah. Thanks for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
Great stuff.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Be safe and be well.